In terms of abuse and trauma, it is recommended, based on my research, that you don't focus on the abuse or the victim status. In my opinion, that only fosters a lot more hurt. Like it stalls your development in terms of moving on with your life. Whether or not you are a victim, it affects your future and it affects your present, undoubtedly. But it does not have to determine your present or your future. You have choices about what you can do. The abuse or the trauma does not need to rule your life. And so, yes, you can acknowledge, yes, I was a victim. But don't make that the center of therapy. Understand how it has affected you, and then move on. You know, and a therapist in that sense should, again, you know, Lycean therapy is all about goals and why do you believe what you do. So if you have been abused or traumatized, focus on, well, what have you done even though, and go that way. You know, you have this ability or this ability. You can use this. Let's make a plan for that. So the focus is never on the abuse itself or your victim status, even though, of course, that did happen to you and you can acknowledge that. In terms of the perpetrator, I would not recommend that a lot of sessions focus on the perpetrator. It is necessary to understand, you know, why did they choose to harm you. If that is beneficial, that's fine. You can talk about that because it's certainly a significant part of your life. But again, the therapy is based on you, not on the perpetrator. You are responsible for, as an eating disordered individual, you are responsible for what you do. They are responsible as a perpetrator for what they did. And there can't be any crossover. At some point, you have to take responsibility and stop connecting what they did with what you do. Take responsibility at a certain point, you know, understanding that of course it affects you. You know, you think about it all the time. But just hopefully you can have it in the back of your mind, but don't let it rule you, is what I'm getting at. Don't let the perpetrator win by making them the focus of therapy. Don't victimize them, again, is another point that I want to make, because a lot of times perpetrators themselves have been victimized. So it's not to justify it by any means or to defend them. It's simply to say that they may need a lot of help as well. So it might help to understand that as well. Another thing is that a lot of people feel very uncomfortable during therapy because it is such a formalized way of communicating. You don't know the person a lot when you first go in, you know, and they're asking you all these personal questions. And it's not the way that people communicate every day. So an effort needs to be made to make therapy more conversational, more two-way, where, you know, the therapist just isn't there sitting interpreting. It has to be a real conversation where if you want to laugh, you can laugh. If you want to cry, you can cry, both of you, the therapist and the patient. There needs to be that connection there. Now, in that regard, to help people feel more comfortable, what might help is if you set up something that utilizes technology. So, for instance, you could have internet chat rooms where you could meet your therapist for the first time, but it's not, or over the phone, but it's not face-to-face, and it's not as direct, so you can still have a moment to catch your thoughts or think about how you want to respond until you feel comfortable enough to make a face-to-face appointment. Those kinds of things can also help with overflow. A lot of times, you know, the therapist isn't available after hours or things like that, but if you had online chat or support like that, it wouldn't matter whether or not the treatment center was open. You could just get online. The chat rooms that currently are available, they aren't moderated well enough, and there's not enough professionals within those chat rooms that they can actually conduct a good therapy session. And certainly the chat rooms that are available don't have a good ratio in terms of one-on-one, in terms of if there is a professional that's moderating, the number of people per professional. The next thing is, that I had mentioned in the last video, is that to do away with the DSM criteria, it's recommended that therapists use eating attitudes surveys instead, or questionnaires. because that really focuses on the psychological aspects rather than the physical criteria for disordered eating. Within that, be very careful. There's a tendency within treatment facilities for researchers to come in and hand survey after survey to eating disordered patients. After a while, patients use these surveys to get an idea of what the disorder really is or what they should be doing. So they become like eating disorder Bibles. They teach after a while what an eating disordered person should do. So therapists need to be very, very aware of how many surveys they are giving their patients. Researchers need, again, go outside the treatment centers, because that will guarantee that the same kind of people aren't answering the same kinds of questions, which again will not skew statistics if you use more people outside of the center.